Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us today. My name is Brent Peltola. I am the Executive Director of Partners in Research Canada, and I will be your host for today. And it's my pleasure to introduce our guest for today, Xiaochen Zhang. Xiaochen is a candidate in Geology and Planetary Science at Western University, and she's going to talk to us today about how to live on the moon. So looking forward to this. Over to you. Oh, sorry, we've still got you muted. There we go. There
So
we go.
how's it now?
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so good morning and thank you very much for having me. My name is Xiaochen and I'm currently a master's student at the University of Western Ontario, and I study planetary science. My focus is on the moon and its geology, but I'm also more interested in the part where we can turn its surface materials into useful resources, and I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Let me share my presentation with you guys. Here, can you see that?
Yep, now we just go into presentation mode. There we go.
All right, so before I talk about my research, I want to introduce just a little bit about myself. I was born in China in a city called Beijing. You probably know that. That's a place. And my father is a scientist. And growing up, he took me to science museums, planetariums, and those were my favorite places to spend my weekends at. And in grade 10, my family moved to Canada to start a new life. I had some hard time trying to adjust into a new life, trying to study and live in using a new language. But overall, I really loved living in Canada. By the end of grade 11-ish, or maybe at the beginning of grade 12, I was wondering what to study in university at that time. And I just remembered how much I loved going to the Natural Science Museum back in my hometown. So I ended up studying earth sciences and specialized in geology at the University of Waterloo, which is about an hour away from my current place. I chose to study earth sciences because I really want to know what happened in the past of Earth history. However, after I graduated, I didn't immediately pursue a job in geology. I chose to work in Japan. My job was an educator, and it was not related to science at all. I was rather kind of promoting international cultures and foreign languages because that's another passion of mine, especially after experiencing living in two different countries. Um, so, but what inspired me to come into space, right? Before I headed to Japan, actually, I came across through this anime slash manga series called Space Brothers. If you haven't seen it, if you don't know what it is, I'm not going to spoil it to you, but I highly recommend it to you if you're interested in knowing what it is like to become an astronaut, because a lot of details described in this series are actually real. They were sponsored or supported by the Japanese Space Agency. And I introduced this to a lot of my other friends, and they all found it really, really inspiring. This anime really motivated me to learn more about the space industry. And luckily, I was working in Japan at the time. And Japan is an excellent country to promote science or space related stuff. They have a lot of museums in almost all major cities, and I just enjoyed visiting every single one of them. And it was also during that time I got to see an astronaut for the first time. If you can see this photo, it was me posing with not a real astronaut. It was a cut-up version of her. But I can promise you, I was attending a kind of a speech of hers and in a science museum, and they had a lot of space related stuff on exhibit, and they had this blue kind of blue suit where astronauts all wear for visitors to try on. So naturally, I had to take this photo. But after a few years in Japan, I knew it was time to move on, and I was very, very lucky to have get accepted into a very unique institution. On this left photo here, I hope you can see this clearly. I went to the International Space University. It is located in a very beautiful city called Strasbourg in France. In the center photo, I took this photo during its Christmas season. Strasbourg is known for Christmas markets, and it's just beautiful. The city center is decorated with lights and a lot of different stores. And if you haven't been there yet, I recommend you to give it a try, especially during Christmas time. Anyways, back to space. I got a master's degree in space studies, where we learned about different subjects, all related to space industry. When you think about space, you probably think about science, technology, or engineering, those kind of things first. But it's not really the case. We had to learn many other subjects, for example, management, law, policy, business, humanities, and physiology, because they are all equally important to carry out a successful space program. And especially in the case when we have to send humans to space, we have to really learn about how our bodies will perform in space. So I just learned so much more in that school, and I just really miss that experience. So, excuse me. While at ISU, we had to complete individual research projects, and at that time, I didn't really know what to do. I was interested in space. I dreamed to visit space one day, but my background was in geology, right? So what should I do? I found one of the available topics. It was really fascinating. It was about analyzing where on the moon can we settle down. If we visit on the moon, if we want to stay there for a little bit longer than a few days, maybe a few months or 1 year, which location should we go to? So researching for this topic really opened up my eyes. I wasn't even know that we already know so much about the moon already. Um, we have samples returned from the Apollo missions back in the 1960s and 70s. And we have analyzed the rocks, the soils, and we know so much about the moon already. And I just got really interested in this research topic. After I finished ISU, I wanted to continue learning about lunar geology. But at the same time, I wanted to come back to Canada. So eventually, I chose to come to Western to study planetary science here. But I am still interested in sending humans to live on the moon, but probably not forever. But it will be nice once in a while if we can visit the moon and have a nice space trip. But it is pretty much impossible for us to live on the moon right away because it's just not naturally suitable. Um, there's no atmosphere, for example, so there's no oxygen for us to breathe. There is no running water. There's no food, and it's dusty everywhere. And you might know that the moon is covered in craters because it just receives so much micrometeorite impacts. So if we still have our wild space dreams and want to live on the moon, what should we do, right? How can we make this happen? So there are several theories that we can use the surface materials. As you can see on this picture here is an astronaut, it's Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin standing on the moon. It's just so dusty, it's rocks and sand everywhere, right? But there are theories that we can turn into these nasty stuff into valuable resources for life support. For example, one of the most abundant minerals on the moon, it's called ilmenite, can be a resource of water and other stuff. It sounds really wild, right? It's a mineral, it's contained in rocks. How can we make water from it? Well, the theory is if we heat up ilmenite, this is an example of a, I think, Apollo 11 sample that contains ilmenite. If we heat it up with hydrogen gas, we're going to have three products that we can all use to survive on the moon. Ilmenite is a mineral that contains iron, titanium, and oxygen elements. And if the reaction is successful, we would have three products. The first one is metal iron. You probably all know what iron can do, right? A lot of industrial applications, basically everything we use we in daily life, not everything, but we come across with iron stuff every day. We can build houses, we can manufacture a lot of parts. And the second product is seen here, the white stuff. It's called titanium dioxide. It might sound a little bit unfamiliar to you guys, but we actually use them a lot on daily basis as well. For example, we use it as a white pigment in some paints, and also it's used in your sunscreen, so it protects you from being getting sunburned in summer. And last but not least, oxygen in ilmenite, when reacting with hydrogen, will form water. When we heat it up, we are going to have water vapor as a product, but if we cool down, we'll have liquid water. And it's a very simple chemical reaction. And because we have ilmenite, we have some ilmenite on Earth as well. There are researchers in many countries. They're trying to kind of design tools to kind of try this reaction on Earth. And maybe in the future, we can bring it to the moon. Another example is something I'm more interested in is how to use the lunar regolith or lunar soil to build houses and roads on the moon. Here I'm showing you some examples. This is, I believe, proposed by the European Space Agency. When we want to build houses on the moon, we are not going to bring every single brick from Earth because launching it is going to cost a lot of money. Instead, there are several proposals saying we can launch something that is inflatable. When we land on the moon, we can just inflate it and we can start piling the lunar soil on it. And it will become a natural wall for us to block out the radiation and protect the lunar base from being hit by meteorites. But how can we pile the lunar regolith on top of the entire building, right? On the right bottom, you see something that is grayish and looks like a bee's hive. This is actually a 3D printed prototype, also done by the European Astronaut Center, I guess. It is a combined 3D printing and simulated lunar soil to see if we can have a very durable product. And eventually we can use this as a kind of a protecting shield on our lunar bases as seen on the left. And also we need to have landing pads for our rockets. We need to have roads for our rovers to travel on. So a lot of researchers in different countries, they are designing robots and tools to have automated kind of production of these infrastructures. So these are some examples of how we can survive, we can live on the moon one day. If you're interested, I encourage you to start thinking about it, and maybe one day you can join our adventure together. But I also want to encourage you to explore Earth as well. Try visit different countries if you have a chance. Learn different languages and make friends from people all over the world, because space belongs to everybody, or actually I should say we all belong to space. So if you want to, I really like the saying that says, if you want to go far, go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So we should all learn to work together and explore space together. So that is all about my research. I hope you learned something from me. But I'm also here today to introduce about a campaign from the Canadian Space Agency called the Junior Astronauts. Let's see. So it is a, I have a little script here. So the Junior Astronauts campaign offers inspiration to the next generation of Canadian astronauts by getting young Canadians excited about space and science. The initiative will allow them to see the possibilities pursuing an education and career in these areas, and to understand how they can play a role in Canada's mission to the moon. There are three three activities, streams proposed by the Canadian Space Agency, and I'm going to talk about one of them later. I think if you can register them online, saying you have completed these activities, you can enter a draw to be selected to visit the Canadian Space Agency headquarters in Quebec in this summer. And there will be more details on the website. If you can just Google Canadian Space Agency Junior Astronauts, and you can find a lot more details there. The deadline, though, is fast approaching. It is this Friday on the 28th. So if you're really interested, please check them out as soon as possible. So the activity I am going to talk today is called Survivor Moon, which is really relatable to my own research. The background story is there is a new kind of international space station proposed by the US recently, where different countries will contribute to different parts or modules of the new station called the Lunar Gateway, or some people say Deep Space Gateway. Excuse me. So as we can see, we have NASA here, we have ESA, the European Space Agency, JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, Roscosmos, the Russian Space Agency, and here we have the Canadian Space Agency logo here, because we are invited to build a new robotic arm to this upcoming lunar station. So the station will be orbiting the moon. And what's exciting is that there will be a landing system that carries astronauts to visit the lunar surface and back to the station. Here is just an image that the Canadian Space Agency released. It's going to, our robotic arm, which I think is going to be called Canadarm3, will look something like this. Canada is really strong in space robotics. We already contribute to 2 space robotic arms. I'm just really excited to see this upcoming one. So for Survivor Moon, we are going to go through a scenario together. As I talked about earlier, the moon is a very harsh environment for us to survive, right? So imagine if you and your team member are astronauts from the Canadian Space Agency heading to an outpost on the near side of the moon. You and your lunar capsule goes off course, unfortunately, during your descent to the surface, and you landed 50 kilometers away from the outpost. In your capsule, you have 15 items that could help you to survive until you reach, until you find your way to the outpost, or until somebody comes to rescue you. As a team, your task is to rank the priority of each of these items. I'm not sure if any of you have done this activity already, but let's take a look at the item list first. We have 15 items. Again, this is in no particular order. We have a stellar map, a map of the stars in the sky. We have 1 case of dehydrated milk, a magnetic compass, signal flare, a small fire extinguisher, a self-inflating life raft, parachute silk, portable heating unit, box of matches, 20 liters of water, 15 meters of nylon rope, two 45 kilogram tanks of oxygen, a first aid kit, a solar power FM transmitter and receiver, and food concentrate. Your job is to rank these items from the least important to the most important to survive on the moon. So I don't know if you have seen this, if you have done this activity already. If you have, I would love to hear what are your top threes from this list. But other than that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I can take questions from now.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for that. I'm just going to stop the presentation, and I'll invite any of the classrooms that are watching, if you want to submit questions through the Q&A channel, or also if you have looked at that list and want to submit your top three, we could do that. You could submit those into the chat window and we could review them again. Maybe what we could do is put the list back up on the presentation screen, and then I can ask a few questions, and if some classrooms want to look at that list while we're going through questions, then we'd be good to go. Excellent. So a few questions that I wanted to just go over quickly. The first one was really about the International Space University. I think we've done a number of these presentations, and you're the first guest that we've had that's been an ISU graduate. So that's interesting. How big are the classrooms?
So ISU offers a master's program, I think, and a summer program. So these are our two. I think there are some other smaller ones, but these are the two major ones. For the summer program, it is bigger. It runs from June to August every year in different locations in the world as well. So that one is pretty much, I think, more than 100 all the time, I think. But for the master's program, it is, I think, 40 to 45 people. And we stay together every single day to learn about everything, basically.
Wow, and it was a 2-year program, is that right?
It is 1 year, optional 2 year. I did the second year, which I would do a research thesis, and I actually did it as a visiting student here at Western.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Early in your presentation, you talked about micrometeorites impacting the moon. Can you just give us a sense of, the word micro makes it sound like they're pretty small, but are they tiny? How small is
they can be tiny, but they can be big. I'm not really sure about the size definition of micrometeorites, but because there's no atmosphere on the moon, on Earth, our atmosphere protects us from getting hit from micrometeorites all the time, right? Because they will just burn down during their descent onto Earth. There's no such thing on the moon. So basically, everything goes to the moon and will land on the moon. But because the lunar gravity is much lower on the moon, so I guess it will be less severe, but it's still pretty dangerous if you just want to go exploring the moon without protection.
Excellent. We have a question from Ms. Sampson's class. We somehow connect going to the moon to going to Mars. So is there a natural connection to these projects?
Absolutely. So one thing that I am aware of is, so in some sense, what we are going to test on surviving the moon or traveling to and back from the moon is going to prepare us from further traveling to, say, Mars or even asteroids, right? So in terms of using lunar resources, we can I think manufacture some, I'm not really sure about engineering, but we can manufacture rocket propellants from the moon and just launch rockets directly from the moon. And again, because the gravity is much lower, it is easier to launch the same mass to a further location compared to launching directly from Earth.
Yeah, that's sounds like a great first step. Obviously, you talked in your engineering slide about building launch pads and what have you. So that sounds great.
Yeah.
I wanted to return also to that slide in regards to the ilmenite reaction. You said there's research going on
Mm-hmm.
right now on that. So have researchers successfully created water out of that ilmenite reaction?
Yes, I think so. I read that NASA did this many years ago, or I think at least 10 years ago. The reaction rate is not really great, but because the composition of ilmenite on Earth and Moon are different after all, so they're trying to improve the technology and kind of analyzing how much ilmenite there is on the Moon that we can use. So it is still being improved. And I think I have heard one or a few other graduate students in other countries, they're trying to do such research as well.
Cool. Um, so we have a couple of answers the um, to the Survivor Moon activity.
Mm-hmm.
So Miss Sampson's class, their top three were oxygen, water, and the food concentrate.
Excellent.
And Miss Fox's class, they gave us a top five. So water, oxygen, that seems consistent across the two answers.
Yep.
First aid kit, the transmitter, and a signal flare. So wonder if you can give us some feedback on those answers.
Yep. So again, there's no oxygen or water on the moon, so carrying those are absolutely essential. Um, Food as well, depending on how long you're going to need to survive. Having some food is always very handy. Um, Having transmitters and receivers is also very important because you might need to communicate um, with bases on the on Earth or the lunar outpost you're trying to reach, right? So having those will be very handy. And there's another one in the top five that I didn't mention, I think. Let me see.
Yeah, so the first aid kit.
First aid, yes. It is, well, it is very possible that something may go wrong. And let's hope that's not the case. But carrying that just in case is it's pretty essential as well. So good job.
Excellent. So we did a pretty good job for those two answers. That's fabulous. And I encourage the classrooms to jump into that activity and complete it. Um, answers are in the website. So you can go in and do the activity with your classroom and find the answers there, the explanation for why the different products are higher priority. So we're getting a little close to the end of our time. Just wanted to jump back in for a minute and just if you can give a thought to those students out there that are thinking about a career in space, what are the things that they should be thinking about now and in their near future to prepare themselves for being a part of a space program?
So as I said earlier, while at the International Space University, we had to learn everything possible, right? It's not just science, it's not just engineering. We have to learn a few other things that are not commonly associated with space. So if you are interested in space, if you want to just, I don't know, get involved in it, do whatever you like to do. You can be, sure, you can be a scientist, you can be an engineering, but you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, artist, filmmaker, because I like Star Wars, I guess. So if you I think, and also you can be an entrepreneur. You can bring space traveling as a business, right? So there's just endless possibilities to be involved in space. You um, just keep your curiosity and don't think not yeah, just think outside the box. There is always going to be a connection to space, whatever profession you choose to do.
That's fabulous. A
Yeah.
great message to end on. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me today.
And thank you to our classrooms. Look forward to having you join us in a future live event. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.